I have been talking about it myself a little bit, but not as much. Not as much as I, not that I would like to, but there's not very much to talk about because it too, if it's not under an overt publication ban, it's very difficult to get any information on it. Now, the hold on, I want to shout out the person who is raising awareness about it and talk about it. Jason Levine, Lavigene, like Avril Lavigne, independent journalist. His Twitter feed is, his Rumble feed is independent journalist on Rumble, 536 followers, and he has done a number of podcasts talking about this. Jason Levine, his Twitter handle is @JasonLevineMP. What's MP stand for? Hold on a second. Member of Parliament.
That's correct, Viva. Member of Parliament. Thank you very much, Viva, for picking up on this. He's using the Newsweek article. He's looking into it. We are not connected on DMs. So look, we're getting the attention of all the right people, and they are out there, and they do care. The media may have not been paying attention up to this point, but they're starting to now. So we'll better late than never, right? And what we're finding out, especially from people like Viva, and we'll be talking to Ray and other people we speak to in the media, they just simply didn't know, and then they didn't know about the media ban. As Viva was saying there, he thought there was a media ban. They did a good job of convincing people about that. So good morning, everybody. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good to see you all. I know you didn't expect to see Viva's face there when this video started, but yeah, we got Viva. He's talking about it, and I'm sure you're going to hear about more from him. So thank you very much, everybody. So good morning to Granny. Good morning to Donald. Good morning to Danielle. And we have a special guest here. Good morning, Ray. How you doing? I'm going to just let everybody know that Rob did say he's going to try. He is traveling. He's trying to do his best, just like Ray here is on the road. Rob's going to try, and if he can't, he'll be back on a day where he's not traveling in the morning. So we'll still have him. And for everybody that's watching, he is the one of the founding members of Conservative Party of Canada, 18-year MP out of Alberta. He is very interested in talking about this, and he emitted an email just yesterday. He doesn't know much. But he knows about politics, and he knows about, some of the things they do there. So we'll be speaking to him shortly about that. Hopefully he can make it today. So good morning, Granny. You've been working hard to try and get your internet and your audio, and we're getting some success, but we're getting there, right, Granny?
You can say yes. Perseverance.
Yeah.
All I can do is just keep showing up and hope you can hear me.
Yeah. No, we get you. Look, we love that persistence, and we love that that you're going to keep trying. And I think it adds to the charm. This is a real show. We're not produced. We don't have billions from the government. We're doing what we can here. But thank you very much. You're trying so hard.
Exactly.
So I now understand the efforts that you will put into things. And who's this young, striking young man here? Oh my gosh! Hello, how are you doing, sir?
Oh, that beard was jet black only 20 years ago. I don't know what happened here.
Oh my! We've got an excellent camera shot of you. We got some good audio. What's going on there, Don? Are you getting into the podcasting game?
Well, I guess I am, and I've set up some equipment here. I've been a little lazy. Hey, some interesting things happening with the Coutts on the news.
Yeah.
You see, the Coutts Bank debanked Nigel Farage over in England. So the word Coutts is all over the place right now. And it's spelled like our Coutts, and it's really, really, well, throwing
helping
things, different little hits out there. And I've seen it on my website, and that's great. Sure, we'll take all the hits we can get, accidental or not.
Absolutely. And good morning, Rob. Rob just popped up. So good morning, Rob. Nice to see you.
Morning.
We'll get to you in a second, but thank you for making it. And Donald, that looks great. I'm just going to leave this here. We're all going to talk on the side. We're just going to stare at you all day. That's one heck of a shot. Good job, buddy. Good morning, Danielle, my little Twitter friend. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good.
You are more normal getting up at this crazy time in the morning, but
I told you 21 days it will be a habit, and you will always do this now.
No.
You find that you're a little bit more productive, like you get a whole bunch done before 8 a.m.
No.
No, we'll get you back to normal. When the guys are out, we'll leave you alone after that. But thank you very much for being here, Danielle.
Yeah.
And I also love your backdrop. Is that a
Thank you.
blanket? Or
It's a like a tapestry. It's a blanket, yeah.
oh
Like a
man,
fabric
yeah,
tapestry. Yeah.
the Lysick
And I've got
Mountains.
the real mountains right out my window here. So
You're awesome. You're awesome. And good morning, Ray. So Ray, why don't you let everybody know who you are and where you are? It's pretty amazing what you've done to be here with us today.
Well, I'm here in Whitehorse. I don't live here normally. I mean, I'm here on a vacation, on a holiday, and I'm from Vancouver, and I would normally be in the hotel where I'm staying, where they promised that they would have internet connection, but they don't. And so
Okay.
I'm at another hotel's lobby, which I arranged with somebody at this other hotel a couple of nights ago, in case the internet problem persisted. So I'm in a lobby now. It's just after 5 a.m. here in Whitehorse, and so I don't expect very many people will be coming into the lobby. So, and that's a good thing as far as talking to me and not having too many other people sitting around. In
Absolutely.
The lobby.
And I could see Danielle's face when she heard 5 a.m. for you. So she's like,
Yeah.
what? No way. No way. Thank you. And you're an author and you were working on an article about the Coutts men. So this is kind of why we brought you on the show today. Want to tell them about your book?
Okay, so I'm an author of several books. Back in 2005, I wrote a book called "Writing the Sacred: A Psalm-Inspired Path for Appreciating and Writing Sacred Poetry," which is a book that introduces people to the poetic techniques found in the Book of Psalms in the Bible, and then to invite people to write their own new spiritual poems or psalms from whatever religious background or spiritual path they're on. And then 2 years ago, I published a book on the 20th anniversary of the attacks, September 11th, called "Unanswered Questions: What the September 11th Families Asked and the 9/11 Commission Ignored." And this is a book that chronicles the Family Steering Committee for the 9/11 Independent Commission, which had 12 family members on it that represented the tens of thousands of families, and they wanted to have an investigation. They went and knocked on the doors of senators and members of Congress and forced the Bush administration to have an investigation, which they first wanted headed up by Dr. Henry Kissinger. But in any event, so I basically chronicle that story of how the families tried to keep the 9/11 Commission on track by giving them good questions, which the commissioner said, "Thank you, families, very much for these excellent questions." And then the commissioners turned around during the hearings and behind closed doors, when they had to have private sessions, only really asked 9% of the questions with any seriousness, about another 20% kind of mentioning without digging into them, and ignored 70% of the questions. So
Wow.
it's the families that I've been in touch with regard that whole episode as kind of political theater. So there's that, and then I've got a book which hopefully a publisher will publish soon. I've got one looking at it, which is a book about the commission in Ottawa. Who knew that I would start writing about commissions, but
The
maybe I'll
POEC?
write about the Titanic Commission, which concluded in 1912 that it was just an act of God, and what could anyone do? In any event, so that's what I've been about, and I went to the public emergency. Some Public Order Emergency Commission in Ottawa last fall for a week, and sat through listening to the RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucky and
Yeah.
Other people, and so I've been writing about that, and I think it's because of my writing about that I ended up on a number of podcasts, including Trish Wood is Critical podcast out of Toronto in March, and so I ended up meeting her in person, in Trish Wood in person, at an event in Hamilton in June, and she really liked the articles that I'd written about the problems with the Public Order Emergency Commission, and said, "Ray, you should write something about Coutts," because she hadn't heard much about. And so then I began about after the 20th of June, starting to try and see, well, what can I find out online? And so eventually I found your show and talked to Granny and so on. So here we are, and talk to you.
So you're writing an article, but do you think there might be a book here in the future?
Well, what I think about, since I have this other book manuscript sort of being looked at, I think that given that I cover a lot about the protests in Ottawa and everything else in that book, what I think I will do is maybe add another 5,000, 6,000 words and suggest to the publisher that I have a chapter about Coutts and just add that into the book. And you've seen the one draft article from the one online publication in the States, which has just let me know this morning they're having, staff are on vacation. And so just to let me know that the article won't come out until August sometime. But I have also written a bit longer article, which covers the same material, but with a bit more stuff about mentioning the RCMP and the plot to bomb the provincial legislature in Victoria, British Columbia.
Oh, wow.
And
yeah.
the RCMP's involvement in coaxing those people to do that. And I also mentioned the interference in events in Nova Scotia with the shooter, and a bit about the FLQ crisis and
Perfect.
why that led to the McDonald Commission. So because I have an opportunity to write a bit even longer article with some people in a website out of the UK. So that article might end up being the one that ends up going online first, but in either case, I'll let you know. But having two articles, as it turns out, about covering a lot of the same material will be good, because one will be for an audience in the UK, maybe a bit of Western Europe, and the other will be for people in the States. And in both cases, they'll be largely completely unaware of anything going on in Coutts.
Absolutely. And hopefully we can give you that ending to that chapter soon. So July 25th, maybe we'll have an ending to that chapter for you.
Yeah.
Good morning, Rob. How you doing, my friend?
Well, good. I was just thinking about several issues as others were talking about the situation with the truckers in Coutts. And I think it's, part of the reason why we need to have elected sheriffs, because that would be a big check on the idea that somebody in Edmonton or Ottawa can go ahead and order this type of thing. If the sheriffs were elected, they would be a little more mindful of, charter freedoms. That's why we need to have local police, because otherwise you get the situation like you do with the RCMP that went into kicking the doors in High River to seize guns and take on these types of orders. Also, you need to have elected judges so that you don't have a stilted justice process at that end. And also in AHS, it started off as a $9 billion endeavor before Rachel Notley got hold of it, and now it's a $20+ billion endeavor, and they've hired on a lot of lawyers in AHS, not doctors and nurses, but a lot of lawyers, to go ahead and put pressure on the College of Physicians and Surgeons and the nurses to execute orders with regard to COVID mandates. So there's a few fixes that need to happen here to make sure this type of thing doesn't happen again.
First, I love your shirt. That's a great shirt. Yeah. And do you want to let everybody know who you are?
Oh, sure. Member of Parliament for 18 years.
CPC.
Yeah. Reform Party, then Canadian Alliance, then Conservative Party. That's correct.
And you're in Alberta.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Now, my question for you, Rob, because you let me know via email, you didn't know much about this. There's not much to know about this. The media is not talking about this. Can you kind of talk about how for the last 521 days, you didn't know much about this?
Yeah, well, that's sad, isn't it? I think it's an egregious human rights violation. I know Pastor Art Pulowski well. I've been in court with him through several of his appearances. There's another one coming up on August 12th. We'll find out what the sentencing issues.
That's insane.
I hope what's going to happen there is that the Crown goes ahead and drops the charges. They indicated at the last court appearance that they were willing to drop 2 out of the 3. These are all terrible, terrible precedents. You know, it's a travesty. Like, you know, in the last provincial election, we had a choice between either you know, a fast boat to hell or a slow boat to hell, and Alberta chose the slow boat to hell.
And it's leaking, by the way.
What's that?
And that boat is leaking now too.
Yeah, and so the question is, can we slow it and actually reverse the trajectory to hell? And I would, you know, I remember when Danielle first became leader, I thought the first thing she should have done was to remove the Sky Palace ministers, the hypocrites that were sipping whiskey with Jason Kenney, Jameson's whiskey up at the Sky Palace, and to say, backbench, you know, you're punted. Maybe after the election, if you survive, if the electorate doesn't punish you, you know, we can reconsider, you know, merit, you know, blah, 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 whatever. But she didn't do that. And now what happened during the election was the electorate punished and took care of the job for her. The only one that was left was Jason Nixon. His brother got punished in losing Calgary Klein, but he was the only one of the Sky Palace ministers who was left after the last election. And it was a very safe seat, Rocky Mountain House. It's, you know, the longest SOCRED seat that was held by Alpha back, you know, from formation of the Alberta Credit Union, Treasury Branch, excuse me, back in 1938 type of thing. So a very solid seat. But, and now she won this last election, and you'd expect that they would do something with regard to this. It's a terrible travesty of justice, because these people are being treated worse than, you know, rapists and murderers and pedophiles.
Absolutely. And with Art being found guilty by a jury in Alberta, I'm nervous about that, because I don't see the crime
It was
with
a
Art.
judge. I just want to point out it was
a judge. Okay, it's not a jury.
A single judge, not a jury. Yeah.
Okay, there was another one with a jury trial, though, that went the wrong way for us. If it wasn't Art, there was another one recently. I'll look into that. I get their name. But in either case, there's a couple examples that Alberta courts are not doing justice, in my opinion. Yeah. So what do you think's going on there? Just bad judges, pressure on the judges? Are they scared of the public, or are they agenda'd? Like, do they have a reason for this?
I think legitimately, if the judge in Lethbridge was scared of the public, he's actually a fellow from Medicine Hat, I believe, that they brought in. But anyhow, if that was the case, I mean, I don't think they've ever seen that many people inside the courthouse for a given client. I mean, you know, the courtyard was packed out front. The courtroom itself, the actual hallways of the courthouse, I was there, and so it's an obvious demonstration of the public's feelings on this. And it's not just happened once, but every single of the aspects of the trial was packed out with people. So surely to goodness, you know, the administrators of justice there understand where the public's mind is at on this. But yeah, let's face it, we have a stilted court appointment process, whether it's federal or provincial. You know, it's cronies that get in. It's a bunch of lawyers who sit down that are on the government benches, who go through a list of names and say, you know him, you know him, you know him. What did you think? You know, et cetera, blah, blah. It's not merit based. They don't award Queen's counsels that way, and they certainly don't award judge positions that way. I know, I was on the inside of that. I know the lawyers who sat. I sat on the Justice Committee federally. I know these people. So that should change, and I think that electing them would go a long way to fix that.
I kind of agree with that. A couple months ago, I was pushing back, saying election for judges may be a mistake, because then it gets political and they get political reasons. But now that I'm dealing with a lot more of it the last few months, I am certainly leaning towards elected judges and sheriffs. I think we need that. Danielle, I think actually the story that I kind of missed the name of was James Soey or something like that. And you understand what happened there with the jury trial, and it went weird. Do you want to kind of tell everybody about that one? You muted, Danielle.
James Sowery?
There you go.
Yeah. So he was considered the 14th person arrested in Coutts. He was leaving Coutts on February 14th, just hours before the Emergency Act was invoked, and was checking out his truck. He saw a bit of a checkpoint up ahead, so he kind of pulled over his truck and did a bit of a check stop. As he went to take off, the officer kind of did a little hey hello, what James thought was a hey hello, and James continued on. He, in the meantime, kind of back tire of his vac truck hit a pylon that had been kind of set up alongside of the lines on the road. And when that happened, it made a loud bang and it scared the officer, who then charged him with dangerous driving and assault with a deadly weapon. So James was just recently convicted via jury in Lethbridge with those charges, and is still awaiting his sentencing, which I think is coming up in October. So we're kind of hoping that he'll come on the show too, because it's a huge story.
Yeah, you can put the invite out to him for Wednesday or Thursday, see what his schedule's like. And yeah, see if he'll get up at 6 a.m. and talk to us. But that's scary. So
He will.
yeah, so
It's
now we have
it scared us a lot when because he's on it, because he did have a jury. It was really scary for us. We kind of know now, like, his lawyer maybe wasn't quite up to par. Maybe some of these pretrial applications weren't made. We're talking about, like, well, what was your challenge for cause questions? Because jury selection has changed a lot in Canada since 2019. Lawyers used to, both Crowns and defense lawyers used to be able to even just look at a jury member and decide whether or not they could possibly be biased, so things used to be kind of a lot easier for the lawyers to determine whether or not jury members could potentially be biased. And in 2019, Justin Trudeau, has changed all of that. And he took away the ability for these people to kind of non-discerningly decide whether or not a jury member was fit for that particular trial. And now that because that's been waived, they get questions called challenges for cause. It is basically an application to the judge to ask a jury member a question. So with this particular type of scenario, the challenge for cause questions are extremely important.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
trying to kind of figure out, like, where do you stand on this? Where do you stand on that? And trying to kind of discern a jury based on that. It is quite fascinating how much jury selection has changed since 2019. So we kind of suspect that maybe James, as a combination of a lawyer who wasn't making enough applications pre-trial, maybe the challenge for cause questions weren't broad enough. It was a unanimous decision that he was guilty of assault with a deadly weapon, when the weapon was his vac truck and the victim was actually a pylon. We couldn't make this up. So.
Yeah, no, you're right. And that's scary. And I didn't realize that Trudeau changed some of the jury rules.
Yeah,
Donald, I'm going to come to you next, because he also changed some of the propaganda rules. So at one point, the government actually had legislation against being a propagandist, and they revoked that. So now they actually don't have legislation to control their own propaganda. Are you starting to see these dots lining up here? He's changing the rules about jury selection. He's changing the rules about propaganda from the government. He's changing a bunch of laws about gender and other things. Is he lining us up for failure even in the justice or legal system?
Absolutely. We also have a very serious situation right now where jury members are heavily influenced by what they read in the news media. Now, that was always true. And when it was just the news media, the media could not report certain things. There were bans and such. But now that the internet is everywhere, we have the specter of jury members looking up evidence, things they've heard in court online, to see what people think about it. It's illegal. Many jury members have gone to jail for it, both in Canada and the United States, because you're only supposed to consider what's evidence before you. And if jury members are looking up newspaper articles and believing them, or what we say and believing them, there's no chance for an accused to refute what is in fact secret evidence before the court. More important, judges are doing it. If you go to my website, donaldbest.ca, you can read about where we caught judges actually on the bench during the trial, Googling the witnesses, the situation, coming to my website to read about trials. And we know, because as you know, they leave an IP number. So we have actual judges looking for secret evidence and holding secret hearings, because that's what they do, in fact, right on the bench. So, juries are starting to become very dangerous. In a situation where you have the Canadian government paying media to pay what they say about all sorts of things, and being, of course, reluctant to take a rule against the government. Well, look at what's in the media right now about Coutts. Photographs of weapons and anything bad that they could find, because, well, it met the government narrative and it was sure exciting. So we don't want jury members looking at the internet during the trial and even before. So, this is very challenging. Things have changed in our courts.
That's a good point there, Donald, that the media is going to influence the jury itself. They'll be selected eventually, and that's a problem. So, Ray, I'm going to go to you now. As you kind of heard there, media plays a huge role in justice and legal. It helps educate the people, and sometimes even use it as a source for their information. So, as you were doing your writing and going through your stuff, you mentioned there wasn't much out there, especially for the positive or for the truth side of things. So as you did your journey, how did you get yourself through that so you weren't taken by the CBC version, the CTV version of everything, and you were actually looking for the truth? Because one of the things I really enjoyed with working with you, Ray, is you reached back to us with your drafts and said, hey, let's fact check this, let's make sure it's good. And we did that. We had the experts and stuff on this. I do that. So you care about being accurate and truthful. So can you kind of explain to us, when you were doing your research and putting that article together, how was it that you were wading through all of that information, misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation that was out there?
So when I'm writing the article, I have to think about, the people who will read the article, whether it's the one published in the UK or the one published in the States, and then, people seeing it around the world. And there will be some people who will read that article that I write will already be very familiar with what the CBC or the CTV or Global News or the Toronto Star, or the Edmonton Sun or the Calgary Herald or the Lethbridge Herald were saying in February, March, April, September of 2022. And those people who are maybe reading my article will have, the undisputed truth of what they believe is the story. And so I knew that when I wrote the article, I had to introduce or remind the reader what the mainstream narrative has been. Otherwise, if I just write about something that's brand new information or questions about that story, and don't acknowledge the story of record, then I'm going to have all kinds of people having comments below, on the site. So I have to be able to acknowledge it. And then it's been very helpful to be able to, with the drafting, having clarifications and information about, like, even things about, the way the Toronto Star reported, what family members said about, Chris, I forget. But anyway, the way that information about what one particular person of the accused has been charged with, and then it turns out there isn't actually an assault conviction. It's a conditional sentence. Of course, as a writer, I mean, in my case, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what a conditional sentence is, so I might have to say more about that with another sentence, so that the reader knows, well, exactly, you know, how serious or how minor is a
Right.
conditional sentence. But those are some of the things that I think about when I'm writing. And also, I was really surprised as I've written this article, this draft article, to be published in the next few weeks, how much information there was in the Public Order Emergency Commission about how many different senior government officials and cabinet ministers in the Liberal cabinet pointed to the events in Coutts as almost like in the context of how they were talking about the justification for the Emergencies Act. Even if under cross-examination, there would be people pointing out, well, you know, the protesters in Ottawa had reached an agreement with key officials in the city of Ottawa, and 102 or 104 vehicles had been removed by noon on the 14th of February, and they were going to be like they were on schedule to remove 75% of all the vehicles. So what's the rush? What's the necessity? Well, you know, and then they said, well, you know, even if it can be proven, you know, well, the city officials were taking photos of all the license plates of the vehicles in Ottawa that were in fact moving, because there's no need to tow a vehicle that's already left the parking spot. Then they would go to, well, look at what was happening in Coutts. You know,
Right.
Marco Mendocino would go on about that. This was like, we're at a threshold moment, he says. And so it was very interesting to see that story. And so it was, you know, and it's interesting to see how it's almost like old game shows behind, you know, door number 1, door number 2, door number 3, because all these people who were testifying on behalf of the government to justify the Emergencies Act would say, well, look at what's happening in the Windsor, you know, the Detroit Windsor Ambassador Bridge, and then, oh, well, look at what's happening in Ottawa, or well, look at what's happening in Coutts. So yeah.
Absolutely. And one of the things when I was being interviewed for the Newsweek article was I gave the quote that, in my opinion, because I watched the POEC, all of it, I streamed the whole thing, we commentated the whole thing, and I was there for the last 2 days with Trudeau and Freeland, who I shared air with them. In any case, one of the things I recognize as well is what you just pointed out there. This entire POEC is pointing at the Coutts guns as the national security threat that was real because of the organization that's associated with it, that's coast to coast, that's ready at any time to go ahead and take on Canada. It's an inverted house of cards in my mind. So at the very bottom is the Coutts situation, guns, men, connection to this extremist group, which, as we all know, isn't. But that's the house of cards, and then it's built up like an inverted pyramid from there. And I think if this falls, it falls. That whole thing falls. And at the top is the PMO and Brenda Lucki. So, you know, I wonder if that's why the media has been so scared about this, because even alt media is not touching this stuff, right? So, Donald, I'm going to jump to you a little bit here. What's your assessment of that? If this narrative that they created for around the Coutts falls apart, it is shown, because we now have a system where you're guilty till proven innocent. So let's say they do prove themselves innocent, and they show that this was complete hogwash the entire time. Do you think Canada would actually hold them up to this? We've had the Wee scandal, we've had blackface, we've had other scandals that didn't seem to do a thing. But do you think this one would? Do you think Canada would be upset that they imprisoned for over 500 days 4 innocent men?
Not at all. Not at all. I think that we have a government that is fully in charge of the media right now, spending billions and billions of dollars, not just for the CBC, but for everything else. And, you know, who pays the piper calls the tune. And that's exactly what we've had here. I didn't even know that these 4 men have been in jail for 1.5 years. I thought they were out on bail. How is that possible? Well, it's possible because our media is just nothing but government propaganda. And once again, this narrative is so powerful. the pictures of the guns. So, no, I think that we have to get the message out there. We have to get the story out there. And we all know that the Canadian media is just falling. It's just falling. The establishment media, but it's propped up by our tax dollars, by your dollars and mine. So, no, I'm not optimistic that Canada will come forward. I think that we've seen that our government and Trudeau have committed offense after offense after offense. Nothing. We lack an opposition. We don't have an opposition. We have a uni party in Ottawa.
Right. And that is a major problem. And then, Granny, I'm going to try and do you for a little bit here. Do you think that once they're free, once it's all over, that our job fighting the media is over? Or do you think that they're going to just continue and say they loopholed it, that they found a way off, they got off, but they're still guilty? What do you think the media will do if these gentlemen are released? Without trial. I want to say without trial. So if we don't have a trial, they're released for whatever reason. Do you think we'll get a fair shake?
No, unfortunately, they'll probably be persecuted under the public opinion. They need to have their names cleared, and whatever the narrative Ottawa wants, it's going to keep going until the media is literally unplugged and stops. Because whatever the media says, people are believing, unfortunately. And these men's names need to be cleared. They cannot go back into life with this hanging over their head. They'll never have a life. So like I was talking to Chris Carver yesterday, and he says, I want to be in the courtroom. I want my name back. I want my good name back. So we're going to have to keep working hard until this is done. And unfortunately, we've got 38 million people out there that have been, a lot of them have been swayed by the media. It's the TV in their living room that they're believing. And but we can do it. We can do it.
Yeah, no, we're not afraid. We'll keep doing it. We'll make as many podcasts as we can and get on as many podcasts as we can. And thank you for all your work on getting the message out all over the place, Granny. Rob, so one thing that we heard was Trudeau is changing some of the policies, some of the rules, some of the legal requirements for jury and propaganda and other things. How do we start to undo that? And where's our official opposition? You helped start that party. You helped this happen. Not this part happen, but you helped create the CPC. Where are they? Where's our opposition on this? Why are they not on TV talking about this? And why is it only Maxime Bernier is the only one who's tweeting about this now, nobody else?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, Pierre is definitely a better situation than Aaron O'Toole was. I mean, Aaron O'Toole was, sometimes hard to tell the difference between him and Justin Trudeau. Pierre's better, but there's still some issues they're shying away from, and that is disturbing. So, for example, like I want to see them pick up against this transgender stuff. He hinted at it a bit at some of the speeches that he gave during the Stampede, etc. But I think there needs to be more on that. And also, I don't know if we've certainly not this morning, but maybe you're talking about lining up the system. I'm very worried about central bank digital currency. I did a deep dive on that after the Alberta election because I thought, well, a lot of people upset about masks and jabs and mandates and whatever, but I don't hear a lot of people talking about central bank digital currency, and it's coming up for debate, a resolution this fall in November at the UCP annual general meeting. It's going to be held in the Grey Eagle Casino just south of Calgary. And there is a resolution about central bank digital, and Danielle's on the record saying that she thinks that type of thing is inevitable. So I did a deep dive on that, and the linkage to Marxism, to the actual writings of Karl Marx and the Holy Family of 1845 to get rid of money, and what Lenin did from 1917 to 1921, where they nationalized the Russian banks, etc. We have less banks in Canada than Russia did in 1917. It's easier to nationalize the Canadian banks than it was the Russian banks in 1917. And part of it's very sad where this is going to go, because it'll, for example, I bought ivermectin during the whole COVID situation, and I'm grateful that I did. But under a central bank digital currency, it would allow them to track that, and then some goons, lawyers in Alberta Health Services or whoever else is police, etc., enforcing that would be able to say, well, Rob Manders is dealing in drugs. Do you want the government to have that much power? I mean, it's one thing if you want to invest privately in Bitcoin or something like that. I don't, but the idea that the government is going to have digital control and the ability to also eliminate your currency and say, well, in 6 months, if you don't take your $100,000 and invest in electric vehicles or some other politically correct hoo-ha, that your money disappears. They can actually just eliminate it. It's ridiculous.
100%. And we had a conversation, I think, yesterday or the day before, that there's a two-pronged approach here. And sorry that we're kind of off the Coutts, but what we're on is how the Conservative Party is not helping stop some of this stuff. So they now have automatic tax returns for lower income people, where they're going to file your tax returns automatically. So that's prong number one. And prong number two is the central bank digital currency, where they're going to transactionally take away taxes. So even if you're self-employed and stuff like that, your taxes are going to be paid on a transaction level. So they're making sure that they collect taxes from you. There's no way around it, and they're automatically doing this. Are you worried about that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, talking about taxes, I've been through an 8-year now process where they laid 7 criminal charges against me. Everything was thrown out. And yet I'm going to have to pay even more money yet. I've already lost about $400,000 in terms of just out of my own pocket. Never mind opportunity costs. That's millions. But now I'm going to have to take them to tax court because they're not even recognizing my house as my primary residence. It's like, whoa. It's ridiculous what these cats are up to. And there's such a weaponization of the bureaucracy. That's another issue that the Conservative Party could be tackling. The Canada Revenue Agency is a bloated bureaucracy. It's 8 times the size per capita of some countries like the United States and the IRS or Germany with regard to their tax collection service. It's a bloated bureaucracy. And there's a lot of make work projects going on there, and there's obviously political direction going on. It's not just my case, but I think of people who were designing systems to go after human smuggling, weapons, more particularly bombs coming in, terrorism, drugs, etc. And that guy, for example, had his house taken away. He was just north of me here in Bears Paw. Type of thing, and his company was shut down. His ability to sell the company for $14 million US, 20 million Canadian was stymied by the CRA, probably because of Chinese influence.
Oh,
so
wow.
it's very sad what's going on. We're having a weaponization of the bureaucracy, and we need to have people speaking out about this stuff.
And thank you for speaking out about it there, Rob. You're one of them. So thank you for that. Danielle, Jury Reform Bill C-75. You looked it up and you kind of understand it? You want to kind of take us through it?
Yeah, I'm not sure how to make it move around.
You just use your mouse on your screen. Just go to the browser itself
Okay.
on your computer.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
So the Supreme Court says government jury reforms are constitutional. So if anybody, and then this kind of came up from this Debbie Baptiste, mother of Colton Boucher. So this kind of stems from this 2018 trial where the jury was considered not tainted, but possibly biased based on the lawyer's ability to discriminate jury members just by sight even. So this bill C-75 is an act to amend the criminal code. Came into effect on September 19th, 1919. And I know that Tony's lawyer has mentioned that this is going to be a massive challenge for us. We've, sorry, I'm just trying to get back to my regular screen here. There we go. So now basically the lawyers are stuck making what's called a challenge for cause. So I do believe there's 3 questions that they have to apply for the jury to ask the judge to ask the jury members now. So her questions are going to have to be extremely well thought out to try to determine, like what you were saying with the publications that have been in the media already, to try to determine how people have been influenced by that. The publication bans that the defense lawyers have recently applied for are to protect the men's right to fair trial. The more negative that is dumped out into the media, the more ITO information that is used by the media to promote the narrative, the harder it is for them to come up with questions. So, even just a question, I think one of James Sowery's challenge for cause questions were, did you support the Coutts blockade? It's pretty vague in general. I know we're, in this case, we're considering questions like, are you vaccinated against COVID-19? It's a pretty broad question. If you're not, you're probably in that the fringe minority of us that aren't vaccinated. It kind of covers a bit of a broader scope. There is some controversy as to whether or not that will be allowed, that kind of a question. Are you vaccinated against COVID-19?
Right.
Whereas 2 years ago, are you vaccinated against COVID-19 was a requirement for a jury member. So
That's right.
all
To
of a
be
sudden
there, you
now
have
we're
to be.
looking at like, oh, well, that's not fair. You shouldn't be able to allow that kind of a question. Well, I argue that, well, not very long ago, that was a question that was required for them to even be in the room. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what these defense lawyers come up with as far as challenge for cause questions. And the Crown prosecutor argued in the publication ban that, well, we don't need a publication ban. He said, the toothpaste, you can't put toothpaste back in the tube, is exactly how he put it. Everything's already out there, so what's the harm, kind of thing. You've got challenge for cause questions. There's no need for this. Well, let's just let it all out. Again, the defense argued that the only information that's available to the public are from ITOs, which are not evidence at this point. They haven't been challenged in court, all of those things, right? So that information that the public is seeing has not been challenged, and it is going to influence the jury. It's going to be almost impossible not to. There's going to be a certain amount of, I believe, cognitive dissonance regardless of the facts. So, I mean, if you already have a certain amount of prejudice against people that aren't vaccinated, or people that sat on the border, or people that yell freedom or honk their horns, if you already have a deep seated prejudice against that, is it possible to look at these four men in court with the right evidence in front of you and let that go? So there's a different element to it. It's not just even the case. It's not just even what's been put in the media. It is a certain amount of cognitive dissonance that some people have with us in general, that it's going to be really hard to get around that. And, in the beginning, we think a jury trial is the best way to go. It's easier. It's harder to taint and influence 12 people, right? More so than one judge. So going in, we kind of figure that, okay, well, we're better off with a jury. However, now that we've seen what happened to James Sowery and all these other things, and it's really hard to know what to do.
100%. And I'm starting to get worried about that. So Donald, I'm going to go to you quickly and then to Ray after that. So Donald, she's not wrong. So when she's talking about things like the vax requirement, now you have people that comply to that kind of stuff as being the only people in the jury. And then you have this question that you're going to ask this now and maybe make that a decider on who's in the jury. And without getting into too much, there's even some anecdotal studies and observations that people with the vax are having some frontal lobe issues. So I'm not, going to go too far down that rabbit hole, but are we absolutely already prejudicing the jury by making sure there's only vaxxed people on there, and these are the kind of mindsets that they're putting on the jury? And is that on purpose?
Well, the requirement that the jury members be vaxxed, that acted like a filter in favor of the Crown. It sure did. It meant you were compliant, you believed the story. Even if you didn't, you were willing to set aside your doubts and believe the government. And so now I'll believe the government narrative about the Coutts Four, maybe.
Hmm.
But you know, the studies are here. We know that the lockdowns cause deaths and injuries themselves, and we know now that and you know, here we go again for YouTube, but it's the Center for Disease Control. They told us that in the original studies and the Pfizer documents and such, that 24 out of 25 babies in the womb died. And there's all sorts, we know now, I mean, they told us that the vax would stay where it was injected. No, it's in mother's milk. It's being ingested by little infants who are breastfeeding. And we know that that has caused injuries and deaths too. How do we know that? From the CDC.
Hmm.
But you don't hear about this in the news. But maybe more people are hearing about it now. So maybe the question should be of a prospective jury member, whether you're vaxxed or not, are you aware of the CDC and information about injuries and deaths from the vaccine? And do you know anybody? I don't know if that question would be possible, but it would deprogram, go a long way to deprogram people. Probably wouldn't be allowed. I'm wondering if the Coutts Four will choose judge alone. I don't know what I do.
I think right now it's jury. Right now it's jury, I think. So
Yeah.
Ray, I'm going to come to you now because one of the more important things is educating the public and getting the right information to them, which is what you do when you write your articles and books. But one of the pushbacks I got on the Newsweek article was, oh, it's just an opinion piece. Let's not care about that. Or, oh, they used independent journalists like we're a derogatory term, or we shouldn't be trusted. Now, there's a mindset in a lot of people when it even comes to providing information that they don't trust that because it's not part of the mainstream. Don't trust that because that person's not accredited by the government. Is this yet another way of the government controlling the narrative and controlling people's minds by convincing them that they shouldn't be getting their information from anything other than them? So to ignore independent journalists? That's the first part of the question. And the second part of the question is, well, you don't ignore independent journalists. You went and looked at what we had to say as well. So obviously you do find some value in there. Can you kind of talk on those two things? Oh, sorry, I got you muted here. Sorry about that.
Okay.
You're good. You're good now.
Yeah, so here I am. I mean, I've been since the winter. I've been collecting my Canada pension, and I should be merrily rolling off into the golden years.
So is Donald.
And I don't. I mean, I know one truck driver in my life who lives in Portland, Oregon, who comes up to the Vancouver Folk Festival each summer. And so I'm the unlikely, the accidental journalist or news gatherer. And why is that? It's because the news, the media hasn't been doing their job. I mean, I flew to Ottawa because I knew that the story, I mean, I could follow Rupa Subramanian, Viva Fry, and a few other people and see that the story that was coming out in the narrative was not true.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's left to someone like me, who's simply somebody who went to university and studied political science and a few other things and knows how to gather news and create a document and do a deep dive into the Dreyfus affair in France or Austro-Hungarian Empire or now, the Coutts Four. But when I mean, anecdotally, I talked to one, historic friend about all of the protests more generally in Ottawa back in the, earlier this year. And they said, well, I mean, basically they told me that the protests happened because Russian actors and because Putin whispered in the ear of truck drivers in Western Canada and thought it'd be a good idea if they went to Ottawa and raised a fuss. And I just, and even though the CBC had retracted the story back in October when the ombudsman gave them, you need to, CBC, you have an influence on Canadian general public. You need to remember that when you report a story, it has to be based on evidence. And yet I'm talking to a journalist on the West Coast of Canada who should be aware that the CBC ombudsman even bawled the CBC out for running that kind of a story. But yet they choose. I think that this person who I know chooses to believe that Russia was involved in inspiring truck drivers to drive to Ottawa because they like. It somehow serves or bolsters their view of the hillbillies and insurrectionists and so on. It's almost like it's no skin off their back if they believe it, so they will believe it. And so this is a problem for anyone who writes a story, because people, it's almost like people think that they're watching a sports game, which team is winning. And so unless they're willing to revisit the story, they'll choose to ignore anything else that I might write in this case, because it doesn't confirm. There's a lot of beliefs that people have. I used to grow up in a world where people would say, you can't believe everything you read in the papers.
Right, I remember that.
I think today, a lot more people just believe it. It's like, I mean, the TV especially is like, it's like I'm turning on not the nightly news. It should be called the undisputed truth. And it's like people cannot believe this gets psychologically invested, because people cannot believe that they're being lied to about something. They're being told something about, in this case, domestic. Mayor Jimmy Willits said that the protesters, well, it seemed like even more than the four in question, were generally domestic terrorists. And I read it in the Calgary Herald, so it must be true. And so you're getting into having to coax people to step back from that quick judgment and revisit it. So it's a bit of a row to hoe to get people to do that.
And I'm sure it's part of the design that they're not just talking about the news. They're not saying, hey, here's a report of the news. They're also saying, here's a report of the news. And if you hear it from anywhere else, they're liars, they're right-wingers, they're racist. Like, they're not just delivering news, they're also attacking competition to them, or the alternate narrative as well. So they're reminding everybody as they're delivering these nuggets to also don't trust the other guys. Don't trust the other guys. Like, we didn't really see that in the news before, where they were attack competitors. They were just focused on delivering their version of it, their perspective of it. And you wouldn't hear them say, don't listen to anybody else, only listen to us. Even the prime minister himself was sitting at a table telling people, don't listen to the other media, the right-wing MAGA people. So they're out there not just delivering what they call news, but they're also delivering propaganda against any competitive news sources. So that's certainly not helping people understand and do their own critical thinking around that, especially if they're eating up all of that. Now, Granny, we're going to go to you quickly. Oh, sorry, Ray, you want to respond to that?
I'm just going to give you a historic example of this. People will go to Wikipedia, and they may, if they want to, look up the Best Picture, Academy Award-winning Best Picture of 1937, The Life of Emile Zola. And the story is all about the Dreyfus Affair, and Albert, the captain of the French army, who was accused of selling information about the guns to the Prussians. And he was Jewish, and he went off to Devil's Island for 12 years, I think. Now, in that film, it's very clear that the general staff point to information, a bio about Alfred Dreyfus, and point to the word Jew and say, clearly, he's Jewish. And so it's an anti-Semitic motive. But in the Wikipedia article, it will tell you that the Life of Emile Zola, the Best Picture of 1937, is anti-Semitic because it doesn't say the word Jew anywhere and so it's like, even though it's like they're again almost like defending the French military in their decision and saying, well, here's this movie that came out in 1937 that's questioning, and so it's like, even historically, we go back and they'll double down on something which should be not controversial.
Absolutely. And that's scary. It's super scary. So I'm just going to mute you there, Ray, and I'm going to put Granny on now. So Granny, when you provide information about what's being said out there to the men, the Newsweek article, Viva, other people now taking it up, what's their response to hearing there's another source of information coming out about them?
Well, it brings them faith again and hope, because they were in a bubble for a long time where nobody was listening. And it's a scary feeling when people just ignore you and abandon you and you have no one. But now they've received hundreds and hundreds of letters, so they know, and they're very passionate letters. So they now see what the public is feeling. They were able to read the Newsweek article on their iPad in jail. Can you imagine the feeling they had seeing what they classed as mainstream media, legacy media, whatever you want to call it, article? That was like the sun just shone on them, and they're, oh my gosh, people see us, people are listening. So it gave them a lot of hope and a lot of faith that they can see the end of this. And talking about Wikipedia there, that's one that Chris Carpet says, I don't want my name punched in and this crap comes up. So it's going to be a big push for us for what we have to do. We can't stop. And this is what we're up against. My own flesh and blood sister, 2 years younger, we've got the same parents, raised on the same farm, went to the same school from 1 to 12, same teachers, same everything. And she looked at me and asked me why the government would lie. And then she looked at me and told me, people like me, she's known me in my life, she's not a bully. And she said to me, you guys were bullies. You went to Ottawa, you scared people, and you're bullies. And I thought, wow, if this is what we're up against, it's not impossible to share the truth and to show the truth. I looked at her and I said, why didn't you ask me? You know, just ask me. And one at a time we will win. But it's going to be an uphill push, but we can do it. You just have to be persistent and keep going. These guys have spent 21 days in a remand jail. If they can do that, we can do this. And we got to get that mindset, keep pushing.
Absolutely. And Rob, when she said her sister asked, why would the government lie to me? I saw you respond. And you're like, what? People don't know this? Why would the government lie to you, and do they?
Well, I wanted to touch on something. I think it was Danielle mentioned cognitive dissonance, and that's a big thing. Because people, when they see things a certain way, it's very hard for them. And some people, it takes 5 pieces of information. Others, it takes 50. Some, it takes 500 before they question what it was that they thought it was originally. Like, I take my own father, for example. His problem, he was watching too much CBC. He got triple jabbed and he died, just over a year ago. And he was in great health before that, but then, he died of a massive heart attack, which, if you know how he treated himself, that, and his exercise and what he ate made no sense. Even the doctor said that. But, so, you have people who were just sucking in too much of this narrative, this propaganda was put out by the government, and they weren't watching enough, independent media, et cetera, to get their news. It's a travesty, but, it's a real problem. I don't have an easy fix for it. I remember years ago when I worked for David Somerville at the National Citizens Coalition, he said in 3 different countries, if there was a massive, say, chemical spill, would you A, drive away from it as quickly as possible, B, wait for the government to tell you what to do? And Canada was about 50-50. Sweden was like 80% said they would wait to hear what the government had to say. And the United States was like 80% the other way, said, no, we're just going to get in the car and drive the opposite direction. But that it tells you sometimes people put too much faith into government, and the government's not always your friend.
100%. So, and the government does lie?
Something.
Yeah. Go ahead, Granny.
If I could say something, if we can all go back to the day we realized the lies were happening, I can still remember myself standing in that spot and thinking, okay, I have to accept this is happening. It was a scary moment to really realize what's going on. And I think some people, it might be a better place to run away from it than to face it, because it's not as scary. It is a scary thought. Like, think about it. The government's going to lie. People don't want to hear that. They will ignore it. So.
Yeah, no, and it's really scary too. When I've been in the court, when the judge said mid-trial that he believes the plaintiff, and I already know the plaintiff is lying, and I know the plaintiff created a fake story, So I'm standing on the defense side, hearing the judge say that. I'm like, oh, wow. He's already made up his mind, and he hasn't even heard a defense yet. Oh, damn. This is going to be tough. I'm still working that case. I hope to have some good news for you all in the future on that one, but that's a scary thing. Donald, I'm going to go to you and kind of wrap up with your final thoughts here about the influence of media, the influence of politics, and how that's created some political prisoners here.
I think that we've got millions and millions of Canadians who have faith in the media. It's always been that way, but it's worse because now it's just the government narrative over and over and over again. And we saw how the CBC recently had to apologize, and they put that on page 57 or whatever. It just doesn't matter anymore. But more and more people are waking up. They're getting their news from independent people on the ground, and I hope that continues. I'm optimistic that the media is falling apart. It really is. Can we stop the funding of the media and let the new media rise?
That's a great idea.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, me too. So defund state media in general. Probably a good idea. Let the market decide. Let the people decide. Danielle, what do you think about that? And how did you learn anything here listening to Rob and listening to Ray talk about media, talk about politics and the influence it has? And by the way, you are absolutely have a career here.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I've been passionate about since the beginning. As you can see from my documents, I do kind of go through every single article with a fine-tooth comb. And I've pissed off the media, the mainstream media so much to the point where I need a new email address because they won't respond to me anymore.
And when you say that, what you're talking about is you're reaching out to them to correct the stories.
Correct things. Yeah,
I've seen many
100%,
emails
like,
where you said,
know,
hey,
even,
fix this.
Oh, constantly. Even Wikipedia, you guys were talking about Wikipedia probably about 6 months ago. I kind of did a bit of a search on the guys, and Wikipedia pops up, what was it? Domestic terrorism in Coutts, like it was the Coutts Four, and then the words domestic terrorism were it was in the title.
Mm-hmm.
And I went after Wikipedia, and it is independent editors that go after Wikipedia. So we quite had a little roundabout for about a week there where I'm like, you don't have any proof that these people are domestic terrorists, right? And they had to change it. Eventually they did. So, and I do that with the media as well. CBC, it is an unauthorized imminent wiretap. Unauthorized is important to me. So when CBC reports all year long that it's an unauthorized wiretap, and then recently in January, they started to report that it was an authorized wiretap. No, guys, this is important, right? People are reading and they're looking. Same with the, Bridge City News reporting that it was a trial when they were pretrial motions. Like these are important details for me. Maybe a bit neurotic about it, but no, this is going down in history as what happened. And it's important to me that your wording's correct and your facts are right. They have the wrong dates. They have all sorts of wrong information in those media posts that people just trust blindly. And not only that, but I get upset with the media. Not once have they done this. Their policy is that if they've made a mistake, they're supposed to list it in their errors section. And so not only do I go out, they will change the data fairly quickly when I point it out, but then I go after them. I'm like, why aren't you posting that you made a mistake? Like this is supposed to be under this list of mistakes. I mean, you print that it was a 30% off coupon when it was a 50% off coupon. That's in there. But you post, information that isn't 100% correct about these people with one of the biggest political cases in our country potentially, and you won't post that you made a mistake. So there's little things. I mean, it might not seem like a big deal to people where that's February 9th versus the 10th, or authorized versus unauthorized, or pre-trial versus trial, but those are things that people are reading and seeing and absorbing as fact. Right. And when these media companies are having, like, when I'm just a Joe Blow from Idaho and I'm having to correct them constantly, and then they're not even following their normal procedure as far as reporting an error or reporting an accident on their behalf, right? Those things should be listed for history's sake as well.
I think you just created a new position, independent ombudsman.
Yeah,
just
well,
created a
it's been
citizen-based
a
ombudsman.
voluntary position here for quite a while.
And I've seen some of your emails, and they do listen, but sometimes they stop responding to you. But yeah,
Well, they
you keep
stop
that up.
responding when the questions get harder, or when I start to really hold their toes to the fire. That's when the responses stop. So you got to kind of know when to hold them and know when to fold them, because it just does turn into a bit of a pissing contest after a while.
Yeah, yeah. And the one of the things that I taught you was when you're talking to them, try and get their documents. So when they say, hey, we have a policy, get a copy. Hey, we
Yeah.
have a file on these guys, get a copy. See what they'll
Yeah.
give you.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a good way to keep that going. Thank you very much for that, Danielle.
You're welcome.
And Ray, and do you think, sorry, you got yourself already. Do you think that there's some hope here? So with your article coming out, there's going to be some readers around it. Maybe it gets into the Canadian mainstream, or it gets into Canadian psyche at all. Do you think there's some hope here through journalism and media if we keep pushing like this?
No, I definitely think there's hope. I think that, I mean, I know that there'll be, thankfully, here I am pitching this story to a news outlet in the States, and they were immediately interested in it once they saw the draft article. Same with the people in the UK. So that's hopeful. I know I'll be on probably a half a dozen podcasts once the articles come out. So that's hopeful. And I think that, one of the foundations of sort of Western civilizations, which was, goes back to, the biblical tradition of like the 10 Commandments. And the ninth one is, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. And I think that this is at the root of this story, that we cannot be a society where false statements, bearing false witness against, in this case, 4 people who, being accused of being domestic terrorists, but as it was said once in some U.S. election, where's the beef? You've got to have something, and you can't just keep on having people behind bars in custody for 521 days and counting, and a trial, who knows when. And I mean, there would have been a trial except for all of the shenanigans with disclosure, partial disclosure, inadvertent disclosure. So something's seriously amiss with our legal system.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And I didn't plan this, Ray, and I didn't talk to you about this before, but you mentioned bearing false witness, so I have to do this. My book is now available, Ray. Okay, it's called Bearing Witness. It's paperback, digital, and hard copy. Here's a hard copy version. It's all about that, how we have to correct witnessing in our society as part of our culture, and how to do it properly. And one section is about false witness and bearing false witness and the importance of that. And the entire book is about how to become a better witness of history, how to record it, and how to report it, because I think this is a part that's missing in society. It's not as strong as it can be. And this is something we need to get better at. So to anybody watching, I have an email in the ticker here, bearing-witness@outlook.com. You can get it direct from me. Or you can also find it on Amazon, and you can order direct from them as well. But if you want to get that book and start learning how witnessing is a vital part of democracy, and it's really something that's missing, and I think we need to work on that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to wrap up here, Granny. So I'm going to go to you. Actually, I want to go to Ray, or not Ray, Rob, for one more point here. Rob, witnessing. So Ray started talking about witnessing and false witnessing, and we call this lying, but it's one of the commandments. It's very important not to bear false witness. And you see this on the political thing all the time. So how do we clean this up? Is it really the work of proper media to expose government, or should this rely or fall onto the people a little bit more? You shouldn't just lay back and let other people do the work for you. Maybe you should be my individual journalist or citizen journalist and do your own homework too. So what do you think we can do to combat the political machine here with media? Is there a path forward?
Well, I think a key thing is you got to expose stuff. And so, if you see something you think is off and wrong, you have to call attention to it. You have to expose it, because otherwise people just kind of accept terrible government. So yeah, no, I like, I think of the Pulowskis, for example. They are so good at, when something is going down, they whip out their phones and they record it,
Right.
and then they can turn it into, a story that Rebel News or whoever, covers, because they have some documentation. I mean, my house has been raided by, I've had Calgary Police Service, RCMP, Alberta Health Services, CRA. I've been through tons of political persecution, but I don't usually record it. And I should be better about it, because some of the stuff that's happened to me is ridiculous. But the Pulowskis do a good job of recording it. And so as a result, they're able to generate, and show just how egregious the violations of their rights are. So citizens need to get used to that, and they need to do it. Not only just happening to themselves, but when it's happening to other people around them.
Right. And I think if people did that, then the wrongdoers out there will know there's more witnesses out there and maybe adjust themselves accordingly. Thank you. Do you have any plans for July 25th? And because you're not far from Lethbridge, can I entice you to come out and maybe stand with us? We can talk about
sorry.
that one.
So 25th this month, yes?
Yeah, July 25th, Lethbridge Courthouse. It's the next date, and we're all meeting there.
If I'm in Alberta, I would like to be there. There's a by-election happening in Saskatchewan that I've been asked to be involved with, and so I may, by this weekend, be out there, but we'll see.
Okay, great. So if you're in Alberta, if your feet and boots are on the ground, you will be in Lethbridge. Cool. Yeah. I'll keep in contact with you about that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then Granny, you want to kind of wrap up? How are you feeling today after hearing from Rob and Ray, and we're getting some information out there? How are you feeling today?
I feel good. Good people need to step forward. And here's evidence of it right here. We've got 6 good people, not necessarily doing it for financial gain, as Danielle just spoke of. We're doing it because it's the right thing. So good people are good people, but good people have to do stuff. We can't just stand back and think, oh, there's 28 people there. They'll do it. I don't have to. No, we need to ask questions. The only stupid question, in my opinion, is the one you don't ask. You have to ask questions, and you have to, as I say, get uncomfortable, and just get out there and do anything, just something, because doing nothing is not an option anymore. And I always say these 4 men, Chris, Jerry, Tony, and Chris, they're not a headline. These are flesh and blood, fathers, sons, husbands. They're good men. And I think sometimes people forget to put a human touch to this. Maybe that's what people are forgetting out there. They just see it and they don't think, well, they're people. And when you talk to people, make sure you get real about it. Like, talk about who they are, because people need to understand it's easy to just shut the paper, turn this off, and ignore it. But if they can actually feel who these men are, then they're more apt to maybe dig a little bit deeper and push through it and help. So anything else, share, as I always say, just do something. Love you all.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
Love you too, Granny. And Donald, the bystander effect is, I do cover that in my book. So a lot of people will stand and see a situation and say, I can't help, or someone else will help, or I shouldn't help, or even I'm afraid to help. So these are all part of the bystander effect. So that's why people just stand there and watch horrible things happen, including just a Canadian watching Canadian things happen. Like, you don't have to be at an event where someone's injured to be witnessing and being a bystander to events. So this bystander effect, as Granny was kind of talking about, causes people to do nothing. How do we combat that? Is it education, or just they need to see some sort of real big event and shake them up? What do you think?
It's a tough go to combat that, because we've been conditioned that we're not to interfere, we're not to do anything. Call the police, call the fire, call the ambulance. Well,
exactly. Run away from the fire, run away from the danger.
When seconds count, the police are only 37 minutes away, or 3 hours if you're outside of Lethbridge. And that's the truth. One of the interesting things that Maxime Bernier came up with about a month ago was, we need the castle doctrine, and we need to allow women to be able to carry pepper spray. Right now we have a disarmed citizenry. And if people were good people, were allowed to carry some sort of defensive weapon like pepper spray, that might change the whole psyche, the whole psychologist. There's, psychology behind doing nothing.
I think so. And I think it's a culture thing for sure. Do you want to say goodbye to Canada?
Goodbye, Canada. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. And then Danielle, building on that, go ahead.
Yeah, again, I have a bit of a history in the human body, and I do study the nervous system quite extensively. So we are kind of fighting with a bit of a sympathetic nervous system as well. We've heard about fight or flight. So some of us are a little bit more hardwired to fight, and some of us are hardwired for flight. So I think if people can just start there and be aware of what their response is to fear and adversity. Are you running or are you fighting? Some people freeze as well, right? Freeze is also a sympathetic response. So I think just being cognitive of what am I doing here? Am I running away out of fear, or am I going to stand and fight with fear? Because it's basically the same. The outcomes are substantially different depending on how you're responding to that. But I don't know. I think I was just luckily enough born with more of a fight mechanism in that regard. And obviously we all are too. So there's a bit of compassion that needs to come and some acceptance that needs to come with people. It might not just all be cognitive. These things are kind of deeply ingrained, as far as your response to fear and adversity, as far as how you're programmed. So I try to have a little bit more compassion with people. I do get frustrated. People, well, I've been out there doing this for a while, and like me and Granny are okay. So try to point that out. We try to point it out to people quite often, like, you'll be fine. We're fine so far. But
absolutely.
Yeah, and I try to be compassionate with people in that regards, because it is sometimes just something that is a little harder to unwire, as far as their responses.
Absolutely.
And I remind people about the CBC. I grew up in the 80s, so Jason, maybe you remember the house hippo, the CBC house hippo.
Oh my gosh, going back
Anybody
now.
remember the house hippo? And so I recently I thought, who did the house hippo? Because that influenced me greatly while I was a child, like this little tiny mini hippo walking through the house. And the whole message was question everything, even if it's
That's
on
right.
here. This looks like a nature show right now to you, and we're lying. And it was the CBC that sent that message out in the 80s. So remember the house hippo, people, and remember that was our very own government within 40 years of this that were promoting that to us to think and research and look.
I'm going to put it out there that the house hippo might have been the first step to reprogramming us. So the 100%. House hippo by the CBC saying there's going to be crazy stuff out there, but we're the ones that will tell you the truth. So that might have been the first seed.
Well, but yeah, very true. Yeah, and they actually I just actually looked it up while we were on the show here. The house hippo made a reappearance, I think, in 2019. Go figure. So the CBC just kind of did a revamping of the house hippo in 2019. As far as timing goes, that's hilarious, but it's true. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Danielle. You want to say goodbye to Canada for now?
Yep. Goodbye, Canada. Keep fighting.
Keep fighting. Keep fighting. You're worth it, Canada. You're worth it. Yeah, and then Ray, I'm going to come to you and let you sign off. Make sure people know where they can find your book.
Oh, sure. So they can find my book, Unanswered Questions, What the September 11th Families Asked the 9/11 Commission Ignored, on Amazon, and order it through, good bookstores, and they can find me on you've got the Twitter handle there, and I will be once the article in the US and the article in the UK come out, I will of course post it on Twitter and keep on spreading the word.
And maybe you can come back when the article's out and come talk to us again.
Certainly, be happy to.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Ray. And then Rob, thank you so much for joining us as well. And if you can make it on the 25th, that would be wonderful. And I saw you putting your thumbs up for Castle Doctrine and pepper spray for women. You want to kind of touch on that before you say goodbye?
I'm all about castle defense and English common law going back to the 16th century with various eminent jurists talking about your ability to protect yourself with firearms.
So you think we should have more of that and take it from a cold dead hands type of mentality?
Absolutely. Charlton Heston, thumbs up. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you
And
very
central
much.
bank digital currency equals communism.
Absolutely. And debanking is a thing, and it's against the law, especially on the chartered federal banks. So maybe we'll have to deal with that one day soon. Thank you, Ray. Well, thank you all very much for being here, taking up your time. We even had a 5 a.m. start here for Ray. Rob was joining us, and it's wonderful. And I really appreciate the extra efforts you did, Ray, to make sure that you had a place to be and had some internet and stuff like that. I really appreciate that. It means a lot to us that you're doing those kind of efforts to bring your message to us. So thank you very much, Ray, for that one. And Granny, we're going to get you there. We're going to get you there with this audio thing. At some point, you're going to look like Donald. You're going to be like all professional with that microphone and stuff. But we'll get you there. But your messages are coming in through loud and clear, Granny. They're coming through loud and clear, your messages. And then Donald, once again, thank you very much. You look like a pro there. I'm going to have to do something here, but thank you for taking even those steps to do your best so that you're ready for the podcast and the other showings that you have to do in the next little bit, because you got a long lineup of stuff coming up. People are reaching out to you, so that's great work. And then, of course, Danielle, I can't see you right now, but good job on getting up early. I know this is not your thing, but it's hard to tell that you're not functional in the morning. You're doing a wonderful job. And this might become your thing now, Danielle. And then Rob, you're a star. Thank you so much. You always respond so quickly, and you're like, Jay, this is important. I'll be there. I'll get up if I have to. Whatever I need to do, I'll be there. So Rob, thank you so much for those efforts. And I'm looking forward to maybe defunding the CBC or the main state media, and maybe put some more guns and bear sprays in people's hands. Those might be some good things. So we're looking forward to all of that. So thank you all very much. Well, folks, happy Wednesday. We're getting some more information on politics, on media. As you hear, there's more media coming out. There's more podcasts coming out. And we started this show with Viva Fry talking about us. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Now, I'm going to ask you all to do your part. If you're still watching, your part in all of this is to share, share, share. Make sure you share, share, share. Granny has a sister 2 years younger. She needs to be brought up to speed as well. We all have people like that in our lives as well. We love them. We don't dislike them. We don't hate them, but we want to help them. So help them by getting the information that helps them think. We're not here to tell people what to think. We're here to provide information to help you think. Critical thinking is important. And as Ray said, bearing false witness is a sin. So do your best, really do your best, like Donald best, to make sure that you're looking for the evidence, you have a critical eye, and you are not being persuaded by others, whether it's us, whether it's CBC or other. Take in the information and use your critical thinking. Keep that frontal lobe working hard. Keep that brain working hard. You need it. It's going to keep you alive. So thank you all very much. It was an excellent episode. Ran a little long, but we had really good information here. So remember, I love you all, and God bless.